Servus Innsbruck. It's really good to be here, but what would make you happy? Now, it's hard to explore all options when you've got just 18 minutes, but here's something that might help. So, what would you do with it? And how would you feel after you've done it? Good. But wait a moment. You could do something else. You just could give the money away. And how would you feel then? Well, not so good. That's at least what most people think. I'll tell you a story. One morning, your doorbell rings, and in front of the door, there's a stranger asking you, "How are you today?" And then she hands you a bill. Spend it by the evening, buy yourself something nice. And then she walks over to your neighbor. Same question, same bill. Spend the money by the evening, but on somebody else. Invite your friends for lunch. Give it to a beggar, no matter what. And then the night falls, and the phone rings. How are you feeling now? Well, how are you feeling now? And importantly, who feels better? You or the neighbor? Now, that's not only a story, that's reality. And what I told you is an experiment that has been published a couple of years ago in the prestigious journal Science. And the outcome was very clear. The people who gave the money away felt better, no matter what they thought before. So you were already thinking what to do with your next pay rise, right? Think again. People search for happiness like a drunkard for his house. They know it exists. They just can't find it. Voltaire, the French philosopher, wrote this 250 years ago. Now, today, science can tell us a lot about what makes us happy. And in this talk, I'm also going to show you that in many cases, the same laws apply not only for happiness, but also for success. Namely, we think we get most out of it when we put ourselves first. Whereas in reality, we often fare much better when we think about sharing. And this is increasingly true the more the world gets networked. Now, we have progressed somewhat from the days of Voltaire, and today we actually can measure happiness. This is what it looks like inside the brain of a person, inside your brain, when you decided to share. So what lights up here is called the nucleus accumbens, but in the popular literature it's quite aptly called a lust center, because it gives you good feelings when you taste a piece of chocolate, or when you're having good sex. So it can really, really feel good to give and to share. And this is a big surprise for economy. And this is why such findings are so important. Why? Because emotions are motivations. And as standard economical thinking has it, humans would only act for the best of their own interest. But what do you have here? You have people sharing for the pure joy of it, and with a good reason. Because without knowing it, they'll benefit later. It's not only that we feel good when we share. People who care for others are much more content with their lives in the long run. Now remember, this is hard science. Some of the latest research done on 10,000 of people whose life have been tracked for over 2 decades. And they're not only happier, they are also healthier. And believe it or not, they live longer. In the statistical average, for years. Now, when I first heard of it, I couldn't believe that either. And neither, obviously, could the scientists themselves who did that research. But they went over their studies again and again, and they repeated it over and over again. And the result remained the same. People who care for others are happier, are healthier, and live longer. Now, I know what you might think. You might think, well, this is fine. And I would like to. But I just can't. Because this is a competitive world. And you shouldn't share too much, because if you do, people will exploit you. That's human nature. Well, it is not. Of course, life is a tough business. And as we learned from Charles Darwin, every being competes for resources with every being. So, in the light of evolution, it seems smarter to take than to give. And Darwin himself, who was a compassionate man, regretted this. He used a beautiful picture, namely the people of warriors. In a people of warriors, he who was ready to sacrifice his life would often leave no offspring to inherit his noble nature. So what does that mean? That would mean, very soon, the benevolent just would die out. Well, but have they really? I see kind people. Altruism does exist. And people do care for each other. And you find satisfaction in just showing a stranger the way. Now, how can that be? So, many people would argue, well, it's education. They'd say, okay, by nature, we humans are greedy, are selfish, but we have been told to behave, and at times we even do. Now, Darwin himself couldn't believe that it's just education. That it's just that any kindness is just a nice facade standing in front of and hiding a very ugly building that is us. And I never could believe that. And nor should you. For if you ever lived with small children, you immediately see how implausible the idea is that gentleness and kindness and benevolence is just education. You see, when our second daughter was 1.5 years old, she was, without any exaggeration, she was a horror of any playground in our quarter in Berlin. So Irene wanted a toy, Irene would take it. Irene didn't get it, Irene would bite the other child. And Irene wanted to have a run on the slide, and the other child wouldn't go away. And you can imagine how embarrassed my wife and I were, and how many times we told to the girl, well, look, you really don't behave like that. And it didn't help. The girl just didn't get the message. And at that time, something amazing and even wonderful happened. It happened when my wife fell seriously ill. And lying in bed with high fever, the same girl would take her favorite cuddle toy, a little gray mouse, and bring it to my wife to comfort her. Here. Now, we hadn't taught her that. We couldn't. Must have come out of herself. And in order for you, well, not to think now this is just the story of a father who doesn't want to admit that he has created a little monster, I brought a video. So this young gentleman is 18 months old. Watch what he's doing. Here you go. He enjoys helping. He has not been rewarded for it. In fact, when in other experiments the scientists rewarded the children for the help, they actually helped less, presumably because they now thought they had a right for their Smarties and marshmallows anyway. And this is a conclusion we can draw from many studies. If you want to kill commitment, if you want to kill it, just pay for it. No. This came out of the children themselves. And you see it occurring spontaneously. In any culture, no matter what the children were brought up. It seems that we are hardwired for gentleness and cooperation. That there really exists something like genes for altruism. Now, how do we make sense of that? Darwin couldn't make sense of that puzzle. But since a couple of years, we indeed can. And for you to understand it, I would like to invite you to join me in a very short time travel in the distant past. Now imagine you are living in a very harsh nature. You are a fragile being. You are human. You are naked. And you are threatened. Hunger. Diseases. Animals trying to kill you. And you have only one chance for survival. And that is your fellow humans. Help and get helped. And in the last years, we have begun to understand that human evolution in some ways really works different, in some ways, than the evolution of animals. That is, our fates are much more interlinked, and importantly, their evolutionary pressures were individuals who understand others, who are empathic, who help them, who care for them, fare better. This is how altruistic genes can come about. Now, make no mistake. These guys here, they are no angels. They also compete. They even will try to exploit each other. So, what to do with it? Obviously, you need some kind of ideas how much you can expect from the others and how much others can expect from you. That is, you need something like a sense of fairness, a sense of justice. And we also see that occurring spontaneously in children a little later when they are like 3.5 years old, some 4 years old. Now, what is justice? What is fairness for you? So imagine this. Somebody makes me a present, of $1,000 if, and only if, I share those with you and if you accept my choice. If you don't accept, I won't get it either. Now, we don't know each other. We'll meet never again. So what if I offered you, say, $100 and took $900 for myself? Would you accept? Probably not. You'd say, ridiculous, that's unfair. You see what that means? You're willing rather not to have $100 than accept the deal that you find unfair. Most people wouldn't even accept $300. In our culture, it's usually like 400 of 1,000 where you start to become weak and say, well, now, it's not quite fair, but come on, 400. Now, why 400? And is it everywhere so? No, it's not. And the little game I just described you has been played all over the world, in virtually any culture. With Stone Age hunter-gatherers, with nomads, with peasants, even with Wall Street bankers. And here you see the greediest people in the world. Those are Machiguengas. They live in the rainforest in Peru. And they would share like 70-30, like 70 for me, of course. But you see how far away that still is from pure egoism? They're the most generous people in the world. They are Lamalera whale hunters in Indonesia, and they are called hyperfair. They make it 60 you, 40 me. Now, where do these differences come from? In fact, you could tell by looking carefully at those pictures. You see? Going out to the sea in a small boat, miles out in the ocean, hunting the whale, they really depend on each other, and they know how dependent on each other they are. Whereas the Machiguenga live in a much gentler nature. There, every family can stand on its own foot. The more connected and the more dependent upon each other people are, the stronger are their norms for justice and fairness. And you would see this all over the world. And this is really good news, because you would see the same development today. And it has been shown that the more people get connected, for example, through the internet, but also through trade, the more our sense of justice and fairness develops. Because it simply is the only way to make it, in the long run, in a connected world. Just think about the Lamalera. Did they decide to become generous because it's a nice thing to do? No, of course not. Because they had to. In that environment, a bunch of egoists just wouldn't have made it. They would have died out. Now, do you want to fail? It has been shown time and time over again that in a network, connected world, sharing is really a key to success for individuals. Even in a very competitive environment like an American university, we know that students who share their knowledge with other students, their competitors, have better grades. In corporations and teams, programmers at Google's are more productive the less they are controlled. Even for whole economies. Economies are more successful the stronger the sense of justice is in that society. So what it ultimately comes up to is this question. What world are you living in? Is it a world where you can really, where everyone really can stand on himself? Or is it a world like this one? Those guys are us. They are us. Never before in history, people have been so dependent upon each other, have been exchanging so many goods and so many ideas like we are today. And this is why it is so important to foster our natural talents for cooperation and fairness. You have those talents. You just have to use them. And only if you do, you can be a winner in this world. So, if you want to be an egoist, be at least a smart egoist. And share. And start doing so now.